I was 29 years old, and I was making my husband's mother's famous lemon pound cake from scratch at 6 in the morning on a Sunday when I realized I hadn't slept past 7 on a weekend in over 3 years. I didn't stop mixing. I just stood there at the counter in my socks, the KitchenAid running, and I did the math. 3 years, 156 Sundays, and every single one of them I was up before anyone else doing something for someone else's family. I was still smiling about it. That's the part that gets me now. His name was Theo. We met at a work happy hour when I was 25. I was in project management at a mid-sized tech firm in Nashville. He was a structural engineer, broad shoulders, terrible at small talk in the best way. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. Simple ring, nice dinner, very us. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I loved him. I want to be clear about that because what comes later makes it easy to forget. I genuinely, completely loved that man. His family was from a small town about 40 minutes outside the city. His mother, Loretta, had raised 3 kids mostly on her own after his dad left when Theo was 12. She was tough, particular, proud of it. His oldest sister, Bryn, was married with 2 kids and lived 10 minutes from their mom. His younger brother, Cole, was perpetually between jobs and perpetually charming about it. The first time I met them, Loretta looked me over the way you'd inspect a used car and said, "Theo says you cook." I did cook. I cooked well, actually. My grandmother had taught me, and it was one of those things I genuinely loved. Big Sunday dinners, holiday spreads, weekend baking projects. It felt like love to me, feeding people. That was the first thing I didn't understand about what was coming. The second thing I didn't understand was how quickly you cook would become you cook for us. It started small, the way these things always do. Thanksgiving that first year, we hosted because Loretta's knees were bothering her and the drive was hard. "Fine," I said. "I'll handle it." And I did. I made the turkey, 4 sides, 2 pies, the gravy from scratch. 14 people at my table. Theo carved the turkey and told everyone his wife was amazing. He wasn't wrong, but he also hadn't peeled a single potato. Christmas, we went to Loretta's, but I brought 4 dishes because it means so much to the kids to have your green bean casserole. Easter, I made a honey-glazed ham because Bryn was overwhelmed with the kids. Cole's birthday in July, I made his requested chocolate cake. 3 layers. Cream cheese frosting, even though we'd had a work deadline that week and I'd been running on 4 hours of sleep. None of this was Theo's idea, exactly. He never sat me down and said, "You will be the family caterer now." It was more like water rising. Each time there was a reason. Each time there was a need. And each time I filled it, the water line just moved up a little higher. By year 2, Loretta had started calling me directly, not Theo. Me. "Sweetheart, I'm thinking a Mexican theme for Cole's graduation party. What do you think?" What I thought was that I was being asked to plan and cook an entire party for 30 people, but what I said was, "That sounds fun, I'll look up some recipes." Theo, when I mentioned it later, said, "She really respects you, you know. She doesn't ask just anyone." I held on to that for a long time. I really did. There's a moment I keep coming back to, about 18 months in. It was a Saturday afternoon in October, the kind that's all golden light and cool air, and you want to be outside doing nothing in particular. I had been inside since 9 that morning making chicken pot pie for a dinner at Loretta's that evening, her request via text the night before. I remember standing at the sink, looking out the window at the leaves, and Theo came in from the garage and said, "Smells incredible in here." He kissed my cheek. He meant it, and I thought, he loves me. He does. He just doesn't see it. That distinction felt important at the time. Looking back, I'm not sure it was. By year 3, we had a system, which is another way of saying I had a system that everyone else had accepted as normal. Monthly dinners at our house. Loretta had started calling them family dinners as if they were a tradition we'd always had, as if I hadn't been the one to accidentally start them by hosting twice in a row one winter. Bryn would arrive and immediately rearrange whatever I'd done with the centerpiece. Loretta would inspect the food with the focused silence of a woman who wanted you to know she was reserving judgment. Cole would eat 3 plates and call me the best sister-in-law in the business. I kept the house spotless for these dinners. I coordinated the menu around everyone's preferences. Loretta didn't do spicy. Bryn's oldest was going through a no vegetables phase. Cole liked things simple. I sent reminder texts. I made extra so there would be leftovers to send home. Theo helped set the table. I'm not being uncharitable. I watched him during those dinners, laughing with his brother, catching up with Bryn's kids, listening to his mother. He was happy. His family was happy. His family was happy. And I was in the kitchen. My own mother, the kind of woman who would have had opinions about this if I'd let her. I kept at arm's length during this period. I knew what she'd say. I knew because she'd raised me to be someone who didn't lose herself in someone else's story. And I was doing exactly that, and I didn't want to hear it yet. The cracks started showing in year 3, spring. I had a project going sideways at work, a major client rollout, the kind that could make or break a team's quarter. I was putting in 60-hour weeks, eating lunch at my desk, texting Theo at 11 p.m. that I was still at the office. He was understanding, in the abstract way people are understanding, when nothing is actually being asked of them. That April, Loretta decided she wanted to do an early Easter dinner. 2 weeks before actual Easter, because that's when it worked for Bryn's schedule. The call came to me on a Tuesday evening while I was still at the office. I know it's last minute, she said, but you make it so easy. I want to sit with that phrase for a moment. You make it so easy. That was the entire foundation of the problem, and she said it like a compliment. I said, okay. I worked until midnight 3 nights that week, then spent Saturday cooking for 8 hours. Honey glazed ham, sweet potato casserole, deviled eggs, which take longer than anyone admits, 24 dinner rolls from scratch, because Loretta had mentioned once 2 years ago that she loved fresh rolls. Theo helped carry the dishes to the car. At dinner, Loretta said the ham was a little dry, not to me, to Bryn, in the specific way people say things to one person when they want another person to hear. I heard it. Theo heard it too. He didn't say anything. That was the first time I felt something shift in me. Not break, shift. Like a drawer that's been stuck, suddenly sliding. I started noticing things I'd been explaining away. The way Theo never told his mother that the requests were too much. The way he'd relay her ideas to me as if they were already agreed upon. Mom was thinking we could do a graduation thing for Cole in June, you know, something nice, and wait for me to fill in the blanks. The way when I was exhausted and said so, he'd say, just this once. Then we'll take a break, and then something else would come up. The break never came. In June, I found out. Not the way you might expect. Not lipstick on a collar, not a suspicious text. I found out because I came home early from work on a Friday, migraine setting in, lights too bright, just wanting to lie down in a dark room, and there was a car I didn't recognize in our driveway. I went in through the garage. The house was quiet in a particular way that houses aren't when they're actually empty. I will not describe what I saw. I will just say that her name, I would later learn, was Kelsey. She worked in his firm's accounting department. This had apparently been happening for 5 months. I backed out of that hallway and I went into the kitchen and I sat down at the kitchen table. The one I'd picked out in the house I'd helped furnish, that I'd cooked 3 years of meals in, and I waited. When they came downstairs 15 minutes later, Theo went white when he saw me. Kelsey looked at the floor. I said, very calmly, you should probably go. She did. And then I looked at my husband, this man I had loved, this man whose mother I had cooked for, and whose family dinners I had hosted, and whose birthdays I had planned, and whose dry cleaning I had remembered. And I said, how long? He told me, 5 months. He said it wasn't serious. He said he didn't know how it happened. He said all the things people say when they've done something they knew was wrong. I listened to all of it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I felt very strangely almost calm. Then I went upstairs and I packed a bag and I left. I drove to my sister's apartment across town. Her name is Elise. She's 34. She has a fold-out couch and a very opinionated cat named Earl. And I sat on her couch at 9 p.m. on a Friday and said, I need a lawyer. She said, I know one. I called my mother the next morning. She was quiet on the phone for a long time. Then she said, "I'm going to be angry about this for a while, but first, are you okay?" I wasn't okay, but I was something else, something I didn't have a word for yet. Like a window had been opened in a house that had been sealed for a long time. The next 2 weeks were logistics. I stayed at Elisa's. I hired the lawyer. Her name was Adrian, mid-50s, the kind of woman who made you feel like the paperwork was already handled before you walked in. She had kind eyes and a very organized legal pad, and she asked me a lot of questions that I'd never thought to ask myself. One of them was, "Do you know where the assets are?" I knew where our assets were. I'd been involved in the finances, our joint account, our savings, my own 401k, the mortgage. What I didn't know was that Theo had a separate brokerage account he'd opened 18 months ago. I found out through the discovery process. Not a massive amount of money, but not nothing either. He'd been quietly moving money out of our joint savings in increments small enough not to flag. Adrian looked at that document and said, "Okay, now we have something to work with. Tennessee is an equitable distribution state. That means marital assets get divided fairly, which doesn't always mean 50-50, but it does mean the court takes everything into account. It also means that dissipation of assets, which is what it's called when one spouse hides or misuses money, especially in connection with an affair, gets considered. I'll skip the details because they're tedious. What matters is the outcome. I kept the house, which we'd bought with money from my inheritance as a down payment. I received the larger share of our liquid assets as adjustment for the hidden account. Kelsey's role was also relevant. Tennessee still recognizes alienation of affection as a civil claim, which means the third party in an affair can be sued. Adrian had mentioned this possibility early on. I decided to pursue it. What happened with that case took about 8 months. I won't say it was easy, because it wasn't. Sitting in a room and laying out 5 months of your marriage for strangers to evaluate is not easy. But Kelsey had documented evidence of their relationship on her own phone, including several messages in which she had actively encouraged Theo to leave me, which is relevant to the claim. The settlement was $47,000. I did not spend it on anything dramatic. I put most of it in savings. I bought myself a good couch to replace the one Theo had picked out that I'd always hated. But here's the part I want to tell you. The part that actually matters to me. About 6 months after all of it was final, Loretta called me. I almost didn't pick up. But something made me. She said she was sorry. Not for Theo, not exactly, but she said, "I didn't know, and I should have been kinder to you." She said it the way proud people say things they mean but can't fully afford to mean, with a kind of controlled dignity. I appreciated it in a complicated way. I said, "Thank you for calling." Then I said, "Loretta, just so you know, I genuinely loved making those dinners. I want you to understand that. But I was doing it because I loved Theo and because I thought it was building something. When he stopped being someone worth building with, I stopped." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I understand." I don't know if she did, but I meant it. I'm 31 now. I still cook. I cook all the time. I love it more than ever because it's mine again. Last Thanksgiving, I made a dinner for Elise and 2 of her friends and my parents and a co-worker who had nowhere to go, and nobody rearranged the centerpiece. And nobody said anything was too dry, and I ate at the table with everyone else instead of getting up to refill things. I remember thinking, so this is what it was supposed to feel like. I want to say something to anyone watching who recognizes a piece of themselves in this. Not the affair part. I hope you never have that part. I mean the other part. The part where you've been making yourself small in increments, so gradual you stop noticing the ceiling was getting lower. I was not stupid, I was not weak. I loved someone and I expressed that love in the ways I knew how, and for a long time those ways were also being quietly converted into expectations that had nothing to do with love anymore. The moment I sat down at that kitchen table while Theo came downstairs, the moment I chose quiet over screaming and leaving over staying to fight over a marriage that had already ended, that was not a small moment. That was me understanding for the first time in 3 years that I had never needed anyone's permission to stop. The divorce was hard. Being alone was hard. Rebuilding was slow and sometimes deeply unglamorous. There were weeks where the most productive thing I did was figure out how to set up my own health insurance and cry about it in the parking lot of a Walgreens. But there was also Elise's fold-out couch, and Earl the cat sleeping on my feet, and my mother's voice on the phone saying, "I'm proud of you," and Adrian's organized legal pad, and eventually, slowly, my own apartment, my own couch, my own Sundays that belong entirely to me. Last Sunday, I slept until 10. Then I made lemon pound cake, my grandmother's recipe, not Loretta's, and I ate it for breakfast standing over the sink in my socks, looking out the window at the leaves, and I was smiling. For real, this time. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long to see what was happening, not the affair. That came fast, all at once, the way bad things usually do. I mean the 3 years before it. The slow, quiet erosion of my own time, my own Sundays, my own sense of what I was actually worth inside that marriage. I don't think Theo set out to take advantage of me. I genuinely don't. I think he found someone who loved through action, who cooked, who organized, who showed up, and he accepted it without ever asking what it cost me. And Loretta found the same thing, and Brennan, and Cole. They weren't villains sitting in a room plotting how to use me. They were just people who found a door open and kept walking through it because I never once closed it. That's the part that took me the longest to make peace with. The door was mine to close. I just didn't know that yet. There's something that happens when you give constantly without any honest accounting of why you're giving. The giving starts to feel like identity, like if you stop, you become someone smaller. I cooked those dinners because I loved Theo. But somewhere in year 2, it shifted. I was also cooking them because I was afraid of what it would mean if I didn't. Afraid of being seen as difficult. Afraid of the look on Loretta's face. Afraid that if I stopped performing this version of a good wife, I'd have to face whether the marriage was actually good at all. That's not love. That's avoidance dressed up in a good casserole dish. What Theo did with Kelsey was a choice he made. He made it, and he owns it. But the 5 months he was making that choice, I was still setting his family's table, still driving 40 minutes to deliver birthday cakes, still telling myself that being useful was the same as being valued. Those two things are not the same. I know that now in a way I can't unknow. Adrian, my lawyer, said something during one of our early meetings that I've never forgotten. She was going over the asset discovery, all very practical, and she looked up from her legal pad and said, "You were a significant contributor to this household. The law sees that even when the people in the household didn't." I cried in her office, which I hadn't done anywhere else, because someone with authority had looked at my 3 years and called them what they were: work. Real, valuable work. That matters. It matters that you understand your own contribution before someone else gets to define it for you. Elise asked me once, a few months after it was all final, if I regretted the marriage. I had to sit with that for a while. The honest answer is, I regret the version of myself I agreed to become inside it. I regret the Saturday afternoons I spent inside while the leaves were gold and the air was cool. I regret not closing that door earlier. But I don't regret knowing that I'm someone who loves generously. I just know now that generosity without self-respect isn't virtue. It's a slow disappearing act, and I'm done disappearing. The lemon pound cake I make now tastes better than it ever did. I think it's because I'm only making it for people who actually see me,